All right, so the first deck of today is one I call Letters from Prison. The first thing you got to ask yourself when you have a prison deck is, what is the lock state? What is the state we're trying to reach where our opponent cannot do anything? And in this case, we are using an adventure card called Letters from No One that has been shown in the Endless Adventures video on the channel. The effect of this adventure is that your opponents may use actions only to draw cards. So this is an effect that, of course, heavily restricts your opponent, but they can solve this adventure by discarding 5 cards. So as long as they have 5 cards, they can get rid of this and do things, and their reward is that they get to draw 2 cards when they solve it. What we're trying to do in this deck is reach a state where they can never solve this card because we keep discarding cards from their hand. And so they will never be able to play cards again. That's sort of the idea. So in order to achieve this, once we have this on the board and our opponent has less than 5 cards, we have a Garden Gnome that forces our opponent to discard a card at the end of their turn, every turn. So if we have 3 Garden Gnomes in play and Letters from No One, that means our opponent will never be able to solve them unless they have some extra effect that lets them draw cards, because they get 1 card at the start of the turn, and then with their 2 actions they can draw 2 more cards, and that's it. So if they are discarding 3 cards, then they cannot be gaining more cards than they had at the start of the turn, and thus they are completely locked. There are other things we can do in this deck as well that messes with our opponent's hands, and that is use Draco Malfoy, who has an ability that allows us to use an action to discard a card from our opponent's hand by discarding 1 from ours. So if we have even 1 Garden Gnome and Draco, we can discard 2 cards from them on each of our turns, and the Garden Gnome discards a 3rd. And because we are a character deck, we can use Seamus Finnigan to get a 3rd action that we can then use to in some way put pressure on them and finish them off. So really all we need to establish a full lock is Draco Malfoy and 1 Garden Gnome. There are several ways we can reach this state, and even if we don't have Draco Malfoy, they may be able to solve the Letters from No One, but we can always play another one after they solve it, and then they are stuck for another while, and during that time we can basically close the lock so that they cannot get out of it. But in order to draw all the cards we need for this, of course we're playing a character deck, so we play what I've called the engine in other videos. If you've seen the Ron's Help video, you've seen this. We're playing Ginny Weasley that lets us draw cards based on how many characters we have, except for Ginny, at the start of each turn. And Seamus to get the extra actions that I mentioned, and the Fat Lady who can use an action to search out a Gryffindor card from your deck. So that's an easy way to get Seamus and Ginny. And we're playing Ron Weasley as our starting character, which of course lets us play character cards for just 1 action instead of 2. The rest of the cards just is trying to help us get to this lock state. So we have, in order to get them to a low amount of cards, we're playing a card called Escaping the Dursleys that also was shown in the Fred and George Weasley deck on the channel. And this one says your opponent can't use actions to play any cards except lesson cards. So basically it lets them, well, not do much useful things. They cannot really threaten you in any way when this is in play. And in order to solve it, they have to discard their hand. And the reward is that they get to search their deck for any card and put it into their hand. But if they solve this, then that means their entire hand will be gone and they will just get 1 card back. So that's how we get them to a very low card amount if we need to, if they're not already low on cards for Letters from No One. And if they are trying to stop us from doing this by having Argus Filch on the board, who can use an action to discard an adventure, or maybe they have a Minerva McGonagall who can discard an adventure from play once per game, then we have these cards. Dobby's Disappearance that can return our opponent's cards to their hand and we get an action. And we have Hover Charm that does the same, except we don't get an action back. But if we combine these with Escaping the Dursleys, we can return the cards that would stop us from would allow them to get rid of Escaping the Dursleys without solving it. And then when we play Escaping the Dursleys, they will have to discard their hand so that we can reach the lock state that we want. Another thing to note about Escaping the Dursleys is that after we play it, if they have to solve it, drawing with Ginny doesn't help for one turn, because if they draw with Ginny, they will have to discard the cards that they are drawing as well. Now these cards, Hover Charm and Dobby's Disappearance, can also stop them from drawing cards with Ginny for one turn, which is really nice. Once we've played the Escaping the Dursleys and they are at a low card amount, we can still use the Dobby's Disappearance and Hover Charm to get rid of Ginny so that they don't draw enough cards to solve the Letters from No One. So the rest of our deck is just a few different tools that help us for different things. For example, Quirinius Quirell can return all creatures and items to their owner's hands. This just, before we play Escaping the Dursleys, it's a way to get rid of all their creatures. Then we're playing some characters that provide power, like Pomona Sprout. She gives our plants +2 health, but that doesn't really matter. We're just playing her because she's a character that provides power as well. Minerva McGonagall is the same, provides a power, but she also allows us to get rid of an adventure. And Filius Flitwick also has a useful power, but also provides 1 power. We have Argus Filch in case they have some annoying adventures that we want to get rid of. Fred and George Weasley to lower the action cost of playing adventures, which of course, because we are playing adventures, is useful. Marcus Flint can once per turn discard 3 cards, force our opponent to discard 3 cards from their hand. That's another way that we can delay our opponent once we have Letters from No One. This basically sets them back 3 actions because they have to spend 3 actions to draw back up. Dean Thomas just to draw 3 cards once per game. Madam Pomfrey to heal ourselves. And also, of course, once they are locked, we need some way to finish the game off. A Mandrake deals 3 damage a turn, so if you have 17 cards left in your deck, that means before you would draw your entire deck, the Mandrake would be able to deal damage 17 times. So 1 Mandrake can deal 51 damage as long as your opponent is in the prison state. We are playing 1 copy of End of Year Feast that can get our adventures back into our hands. So this is just another way to solidify our lock with Letters from No One. We have Halloween Feast in case this one allows us to take up to 4 creature cards from our discard pile into our hand. So Halloween Feast is just in case our important creatures have been discarded somehow, we can get back Guardian Gnome and Mandrake. And the rest of the cards are just lessons to allow us to play our cards. Oh yeah, we're also playing, of course, Hannah Abbott, which allows us to get cards from our discard pile back. We can trade 2 cards in our hand for 2 in our discard pile. So just another way to solidify a lock by recycling Letters from No One, for example, or maybe you need many copies of Dobby's Disappearance to get rid of more cards your opponent has in play, then this is a really great card. So yeah, that's basically the deck. You're just trying to reach this lock state, and once you do, you get a Mandrake into play, and the game will be over.